and that gets us to the next game that we wanted to talk about, and it's Borussia Dortmund. Dortmund 4-1 against Freiburg. Whisper it, Stefan, but it's only 5 points to a Champions League spot. And Leipzig drop points, sorry, Mainz drop points, Gladbach drop points. Dortmund, of course, took care of Freiburg themselves. Uh, this actually seems doable now.
Yeah, I posted on social media that meme of The Simpsons where Barney gets thrown out of the pub and then he shows up back again like a minute later. I was like, this is what Dortmund are
Yeah,
like when the Bundesliga tries its best to kick them out of the top four and they just always find a way to get back into it. Um, I thought Dortmund were great in this game. I must
yeah.
admit, I thought the first half, I thought Freiburg gave a decent account of themselves until Adeyemi obviously scored with a really good goal. But Dortmund just kind of came in, they just kind of grew into the match. At half time, I did kind of say, it's a match that maybe could you, I feel like in maybe like 3 or 4 months ago, you would have said there's a game where Dortmund are obviously a goal ahead, but they just kind of lose control of it in the second half. And then they go on and drop points, which is something they've done over and over and over again in away games. But I think they had two things in their favour. One, they're playing Freiburg, who seem to have this real mental block against Dortmund. They haven't beat Dortmund since 2021, if I'm not mistaken. And just some interesting kind of performances from the Dortmund team. There's two players that really stood out to me in this game, maybe three. I thought Adeyemi was great. I thought he was really really vibrant up front, played in a more central role, took his goal really well. A lovely bit of skill to kind of get past the defender. A lovely like a final kind of touch to set himself up to score. I thought Gregor Kobel actually had a really understated, impressive performance. He made 2 or 3 really big saves, particularly in the second half, I think. And it looked like the old Gregor Kobel, where it's like at least once a game he pulls Dortmund out of the fire. He kind of saves them from that clumsy goal, which just kind of brings the whole house of cards falling in on itself. So he looked like his old self, which is really encouraging from a Dortmund point of view. But I thought Chukwuemeka was the real standout for Dortmund in this team. He's playing in that kind of central midfield role alongside Pascal Gross and kind of Julian Brandt, and he was the perfect kind of link-up player for between midfield and attack. He actually set up Bayer for a good shot in the first half. He then obviously scores his own goal. Okay, it was a huge deflection, but the fact that he's still getting into those positions to kind of hit shots was great. And then for Dortmund's third goal, it's really worth looking up on YouTube if you haven't seen the highlights, because it's a lovely bit of skill to get past like 2 or 3 players from Mainz and play a wonderful through ball. And that's just something that I think Dortmund have been missing so much this season. We talk so much about Julian Brandt. I mean, I've written about it constantly on the Substack about how he's basically been Dortmund's only attacking player, playmaking player for so many seasons now. And actually, I wrote a piece diving into why Dortmund's away form has been so bad this season. And basically, what it came down to was the fact that in away games, teams can mark Julian Brandt out of games. And in this whole Dortmund system, it's just kind of crumbled. Laterally, they've been able to kind of turn to Pascal Gross, and he's kind of stepped up as something of a playmaker, but not really nearly as kind of potent as Julian Brandt is at his best at times. But then we got this guy Chukwuemeka who comes in. He's got the speed and pace to dribble by opposing players, but he's also got that really impressive passing ability. And I thought the way that he kind of set up that pass for Julian Brandt to kind of set up his third goal is something that Dortmund have probably been missing since Jude Bellingham was in the team. They've been missing a guy who could just pull away from another or opposing player in the middle of the park and just thread a ball like 30 or 40 yards into the final third. Mencha has had some ability to do that, but he's not really there. Pascal Gross has been moved around the pitch. Sometimes at left back, sometimes at right back, sometimes he's defensive mid. He's obviously a great passer of the ball, but he's obviously not a young player anymore. Marcel Sabitzer probably could have done it 10 years ago, but he's obviously not
Yeah.
that player anymore. And then, of course, Emre Can is now a central defender. So it was a great performance, and I'm really intrigued to see if he can kind of nail down that spot for the end of the season, because I was reading in Kicker today that the buy option for Dortmund is 30 million euros, and if he can put on performances like that routinely, then I think that's an absolute bargain if Dortmund can get him in the summer for that amount of money.
But they gotta do it, right? If you can get Carney for that kind of money, that makes so much sense for me. I mean, there is reports just before we started doing this podcast that Gittens has told, Jamie Gittens has told the Dortmund bosses that he wants to leave. And I just had to kind of roll my eyes on that news story because I'm like, well, the way he's been playing lately, would you really be upset if he leaves? Right?
No.
He was great in the first half of the season, and he wasn't fantastic in the second half. So if you can cash in on him and keep Carney, that is, I think, something you got to do. It's a logical transaction for me because you look at this particular game, right? The way the setup was with the two up front, Adeyemi up front, Bayer up front, and then Carney kind of behind them. Um, sure, Guirassy can also fit into the squad, but it makes he seems like more of a vital piece going forward than yet another winger. Is what I'm trying to say. Especially if these reports out about Jadon Sancho potentially coming back are true. If Sancho does come back, and you know, I think that's more believable than a lot of people think. I mean, we did a show on it, and in a lot of ways, it actually does make sense. Gittens
Mm.
really is surplus material. Of course, like this whole story is like, oh, they want to have 100 million euros for him, and now they dropped the price to 60 to 70 million euros. I don't think there's a planet where anyone pays that kind of money for him, but sure, keep on dreaming, I guess. But there's certainly a planet where someone will maybe pay like 40, and then if that's enough to keep Carney, then yeah, that's a good trade. You should probably do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with Jamie Gittens is that he just plays in a position that there's so many options for Dortmund. We've talked about in recent weeks about how Maximilian Bayer has come in and kind of taken his role on the left-hand side. In this match, curiously, Sergio Guirassy started on the bench, and I actually thought Adeyemi and Bayer had a really good link-up play. It was basically a kind of old-fashioned kind of front two, and I thought the two of them worked really well with each other. And I wrote my newsletter on Leverkusen this week, but I was really tempted to do something on whether Dortmund actually looked better without Guirassy in this team, which is crazy to say because he's comfortably their best source of goals this season. He's done a pretty decent job at Dortmund, obviously. So it seemed a bit harsh to kind of pull at that thread. But point is, they've got these two really impressive young German players in Adeyemi and Maximilian Bayer, and they're both going from strength to strength this season. You've still got even guys like Julian Duranville, for example, who's been out with injury for much of
Yeah.
the season, but when he has played, he's done quite well. He's another winger. Julian Brandt traditionally likes to play out left. We have no idea if Kovac has plans to stick him out there. Gio Reyna's still in the team as well. And there's also that Cole Campbell, the young player at Dortmund as well. So if Jamie Gittens has kind of made these kind of demands, it's never really demands. It's usually just, a player saying to his agent, look, I'm not getting enough game time. Let's consider our options. And then it gets out and it's like player makes transfer demand. I don't think it's really that case. I think he's probably just a bit bummed out that there are other young players in the Dortmund team who are getting ahead of him. But yeah, if this was Football Manager, you would be saying, okay, I'll sell Jamie Gittens for 40, 50 million euros, make sure I pick up Chukwuemeka. And that way I've sold a player in a position where I've got plenty of depth and I've signed a player where I desperately need more depth. And I think that would go a long way to fix a lot of Dortmund's problems next season. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens, and we don't know what. I mean, Gittins might end up scoring a hat trick against Barcelona this week, and then that whole narrative flips on its head. But yeah, and also to be fair to Gittins, by the way, just for a moment, it's not really that he's been bad or that he's not as good as these guys. It's just that he doesn't fit into this system. He's a left-sided winger who is predominantly a goal scorer, and he's playing in a team that has a big target man. And when you have a big target man up front, you have to provide chances for him. Gittins just doesn't really have that in his game. His shooting, I think, his dribbling and his shooting, in my opinion, are his two greatest assets. He's not known for his fantastic dribbling. He's not known for his fantastic through balls. He's a goal scorer through and through, and I'm sure he'll do really well in maybe other teams doing that. But in this Dortmund team, with his tactics, with these players, it just doesn't really quite click into gear, and that's why he's been on the bench for much of the second half of the season.
So maybe Max Eberl can spend some more of that Bayern money that he likes to spend on him this summer. Um, I mean, this is yeah. I mean, the thing is too, if I was Borussia Dortmund, this is the one thing that would make me maybe pause. He's under contract until 2028. And do you sell an asset like that when it's not at the highest point?
Hmm.
This is
Yeah, but
the one thing to consider.
yeah, I mean, well, the question is like, is he going to get game time next season? That's the question.
Mm,
Dortmund have had plenty of young players who were potential world beaters and have just fizzled out. It's not really, it's not a proven thing or an inevitability that he will go on to become a great player. He's obviously had great talent, but I mean, there's another player in this team, Gio Reyna, who once upon a time also looked like a world beater. And through injury and through circumstance, he's just never really managed to tie down a first team spot on that team. So if I know Dortmund like I think I know Dortmund, then I think they'll probably sell him if the right price comes this summer. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But maybe, I mean, if we say all this, there's a good chance that Dortmund might even just turn around at the end of the season, say to Niko Kovac, yeah, we don't actually want to stick with you. So they hire someone else.
yeah,
And in 3 months' time, Dortmund have a new head coach who wants Jamie Gittens to be the key player in this team. So a lot can change at Dortmund. But and as we know, because a few weeks ago we were saying that they're going to be stuck in mid-table, and now they're potentially going to end up finishing in the top four.
I think a lot. I mean, I do think there is now a chance that they finish top four. But I think a lot will be decided this week on where this journey is going to go. And we have to see whether this was just a one-off against Freiburg, as you rightfully said, a team that they like to beat. I think, before Freiburg's last win against them, I think that was 20 years where Freiburg didn't beat them. It is, if there's a boogie team for Freiburg, Dortmund is it. They are, Dortmund do traditionally really well against them. It's just how it is. So let's just wait to see how this develops. And I also think this Champions League game against midweek against Barcelona is going to be pretty decisive. So because if they get a good result in Barcelona, even a draw or a narrow loss, and they somehow get the coals out of the fire back at home in Dortmund, which remember the game that they played earlier this season, it was pretty tight. That was a game that both sides were just going at each other. Dortmund probably played better against Barcelona than Bayern played against Barcelona, just in comparison, right? Um, and so it is not beyond this Dortmund team to somehow sneak past Barcelona. And then you're in the semi-final of the Champions League. And we've seen this last year, then anything can happen. It's the way that competition is, and it's a cup competition, right? Um, and that gets me back to Niko Kovac, because if Niko Kovac sneaks into the top four and somehow plays with this team in Munich on May 31st, you get into, oh, I guess like Terzic left after reaching the Champions League final, so there's that theory. But you know what I mean? Like it gets really hard for Dortmund. I mean, as I reported last week, the reason why Terzic and Dortmund went separate ways is because Terzic didn't think the club was ambitious enough, right? But if Niko Kovac goes into a team meeting at the end of the season and whisper quietly, maybe has won a title, I don't think I don't think Dortmund would be in a position where they could sack him, and Niko Kovac wouldn't be the sort of person who would say like, "Oh yeah, that was fun. I'm gonna leave now." He'd be just thankful to have a job.
Yeah, I guess the issue is can they beat Barcelona, and it's a huge point because today we were obviously found out that Schlotterbeck's out for the rest of the
Yeah,
season, and that I think is going to be the biggest hurdle for Dortmund. I think this game against Barcelona is going to be nuts because I think Dortmund just cannot defend. They obviously couldn't keep a clean sheet against Freiburg. Freiburg had some chances in this game. It's worth saying they had an XG of 1.4, which is nothing to nothing to laugh at. And it was a back line for Dortmund where, it was Emre Can in the middle of the park, Anton, who again I thought was okay, but not at all convincing. And Benzabaini was the third central defender. So you've technically got a back line there of just one central defender among your three among your three central positions. And it's going to be a huge question mark for Dortmund how they kind of deal with that going forward. I reckon we'll probably see a similar system maybe, where obviously Pascal Gross can sit in front of that back line and he can kind of drop deep if we want, if necessary. And then they also had Svensson and Rierson as wing backs. So it's a back line that can very quickly become almost like a back six if need be, which they'll probably need to keep tabs on all of Barcelona's attacking players. But I think the crucial thing is that Dortmund do have firepower up front. It does feel like everyone's kind of clicking into gear.
yeah,
Not just Chukwuemeka, but Brandt looked back to his old best. Adeyemi looked really good. I thought Maximilian Bayer looked really good. Girassi came on. and did well. And we just talked about Jamie Gittens struggling for game time, but of course he did get a goal. So it'll be really interesting to see how Dortmund do approach this Barcelona game, because they're definitely very top heavy. But I suspect Gregor Kobel will probably be asked to pull off some other big saves in this tie, because I can't imagine they'll be keeping any clean sheets.
Well, I mean, there's one thing. I'm just looking up the goal differential for Barcelona. I know they have the highest goal differential in La Liga with 54 goals plus, but just want to look up the defensive numbers here real quick, because we all know Hansi Flick loves to play with the very high line, right? So what is their goal differential? Why does every side, Stefan, why does every side only show goal differential, actually not goals plus minus? Do you have the stat in front of you? What's the best defending team in the La Liga at the moment?
Probably could. Let me quickly check. Standings. They've conceded 29 goals this season. Real Madrid have conceded 31. Atletico Madrid
Oh, so wow,
24.
okay.
So
So
it's not
that's
bad.
not typical Hansi Flick football then. Because I remember that year at Bayern where they won the title, they conceded a lot of goals. It's just that
Mm.
they just went guns blazing, right? And they got a huge goal differential, and because they scored so many goals, I think they scored over 100 goals that year. My point being is that usually when you get Hansi Flick football, you get fireworks, right? And I mean, we saw that against Bayern. We saw it in the first game against Dortmund as well. And I think what's what I'm really looking forward to, and what I'm really fascinated about, is seeing Rafinha and Lewandowski against this Dortmund back line without Schlotterbeck. I think is going to be a really tricky proposition, because Schlotterbeck has been better lately,
Mm.
right? He was really good at the Nations League. He's been good for Dortmund. I mean, there is still questions about his defensive abilities, and I think Niko Kovac already had to deal with it in this game against Freiburg. I think a big reason why he went to a back three was because of the concern without Schlotterbeck, right? I mean, granted, he's done it before this season, but yeah, I think that is really where this game is going to be decided. Or we're going to see a crazy 6-6, 5, like 6-6 on aggregate or something like that. I mean, that wouldn't be out of this world either. But yeah, I mean, without Schlotterbeck, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Niko Kovac is going to try to nullify Lewandowski, Rafinha, and Lamine Yamal. I mean, that is an attacking line that is going to be very hard to contain.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Barcelona's defense is they've actually conceded 13 goals in 10 games in the Champions League this season, and that tie against Benfica was far from convincing by any means.
Hmm.
As you said, the game against Dortmund, which was a real kind of box-to-box bonanza, really, but they also drew with Atalanta, they lost to Monaco, made a real kind of dog's dinner of the win over Red Star Belgrade as well, so they haven't been perfect in the Champions League this season. They've got a lot of firepower, which does kind of make up for it. And you're right, it'll be interesting to see how they do against Dortmund. Dortmund are a team who obviously seem to do better in the Champions League to a comical degree. They've got all their attacking players are kind of really kind of seemingly at the kind of peak of their powers, it would seem, I think. And they've got a defensive system which isn't perfect. But then you could probably make the same case for Barcelona, as you said. So it'll
Yeah.
hopefully be a very entertaining match, or over the course of 2 legs, and we'll get a lot of goals. But hey, look, crazier things have happened, especially when it comes to Dortmund in the Champions League. So I would not be surprised if they do something here, and I would also be surprised if they cause an upset against Bayern Munich in the following Bundesliga game, because it would just be the most Dortmund thing ever.